Oh, hello. Well, it is, as you all know, Mother's Day. Poor Anna Jarvis. Who knows who Anna Jarvis was? Okay, well, how about Julia Ward Howe? Okay. Well, Julia Ward Howe is the person to whom many people attribute Mother's Day, although it's not quite correct. Yes, she composed the Battle Hymn of the Republic, for which you may be glad or sad or otherwise. She started something in her day, back in the late 19th century, I should say, late 1800s, which was more like a meeting of women, a peace meeting. And the idea kind of spread, but it wasn't until Anna Jarvis came along after the turn of the century and worked her tail off to get people to recognize this thing she called Mother's Day. When it was finally signed into a law or an action by the president that it became a national holiday, Wilson did that for her. But, you know, she worked with the flower companies and all sorts of people who had commercial interests in the idea. Although, for some reason, at least what I've read, she just didn't put that together in some way. So that she got this national holiday declared, and then as she saw the commercialism of it develop, she tried to get it undone. She tried to get rid of Mother's Day because it wasn't what she had in mind. I mean, Julia Ward Howe and dear Anna Jarvis wanted women's voices to be heard, and they just weren't in those days. And so this was their attempt to create 365th of the year, where it was expected that women's voices, whether in the streets or in the homes or wherever, would be heard about issues of the day. So when it became a flower giving and a gift giving and a candy giving and that sort of thing, Anna was very discouraged. So she wanted it all undone. But we continue to celebrate, and I brought a picture of my mom here. This is, you can see it later, but it's my mom in one of her happy moments, holding my son when he was 11 months old. And we were in Hawaii and having a lovely time, which was unusual for Mom, I think. She had a hard life, and this was a very special thing that we did with a few other family members. You know, my mom used to say this, you remember some things your mom says, and some things you just assume not, but they come through. So, my mom used to say all the time, it's a great life. And then she'd take a deep sigh. If you don't weaken. How many people have heard that or something similar? I swear, if I could think of anything my mother said. Excuse me, my phone's ringing. I got to take the call. Hello? Wait a second. Mom? Mom? Wait. I don't recognize the number. I didn't know you could call me. I mean, yeah, no, I know. I didn't call you, but I didn't know how I could call you. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, you heard what I just said, huh? Well, you did say it a lot. I'm not trying to diss you, Mom. I love you. Yes, I still love you. I talk to you a lot, although not on the phone, I have to admit. Uh-huh. You want me to be what? You don't want me to talk pablum, so to speak, to the mothers and would-be mothers and others in the congregation. Gotcha. I won't. I know a lot of people do. It's Mother's Day, the flowers, the candy, the whatever. Yeah, I know. I didn't always give you the flowers and the candy and the whatever, but you get the, no, I wouldn't. You know me. I think you know me. Yeah, well, then you probably know I'm in the middle of a service. And yeah, because, of course, you know more than I could possibly imagine one could know at this point. I got you. I get it. So then you know I need to go. But, you know, if you can call back, you think, are you allowed? Is it like part of the deal? Okay. So I'd love to hear from you another time. I really would. And before you go, I just want you to know that, Mom, I love you. Yeah. And I don't know if I ever said it enough. I know you loved me too, and you do now. And it's bigger than I could ever imagine now. I got it. And what was the song that I sang to you when you were dying? When I was in Florida and you were in California? Yeah. I've sung it to lots of people. You don't remember it exactly. Okay. It goes something like this. It's a Zipper song. I'll see if I can do it. When I see the light surround me, when I see that bright light all around me, when I see the light my mother followed, I will follow too. I will follow too. Yeah, that's sort of it, Mom. Yeah, and I've sung it to lots of people at the end of their lives too. Yeah, you got some folks you want to share that with. Okay. Well, I don't know how that goes where you are now. But anyway, I do need to go. Remember that I talk to you all the time and you're in my heart. Okay. Thanks for the call. Yeah, I know. It's probably a toll call. Okay, yeah, gotta go. Bye. Wow. Sorry, folks. I had to take the call. Well, like my mom said, yeah, I can't give you pablum on Mother's Day. Even though it's such a cheerful day for so many people, it's not for so many others. Woo! That was big. Well, so mothers, how many of you looked at the title of this sermon and said, what the curious nature of hope and of mothering? So how many of you have mothered? Raise your hands. Okay, I want a correction here. I want everyone in this room to raise their hands. How many of you have mothered? Everyone, male, female, whatever. You have mothered. Hands down. Whew, I'm glad we got through that. So in our dualistic world, you know, if you look up mothering or fathering, you may not be surprised by this, but if you look up mothering, there are qualities given for mothering. You can imagine what they might be: caring, nurturing, protecting, characteristics. Things one does, one cares, activity, action. If you look up fathering, you know what it says? It says fathering a child. Did you ever look it up? Look it up. I mean, maybe it was just the dictionary I looked in. But fathering doesn't have characteristics in the definition. The implication is that there are two definitions in there, but basically what it is you plant the seed, a baby is born, and you're out in the world creating. But mother has qualities. And I want to suggest that while we have genderized throughout time, right? Women can, not always, but sometimes be mothers. Men aren't mothers. And women cannot be fathers. Only men can be fathers. But that's in a dualistic world. And as you know, that conversation and reality about gender is very different now than when some of us were growing up. Right? You're with me? Yeah. So gender is more fluid for some, and it's more diverse than certainly when I was growing up I thought about. I mean, I was a little bit of a tomboy. How many tomboys? Look at them all! Woo! Okay, we're going to go out and get a saw and a hammer and do some work. All right. No, but there were a lot of tomboys. But you know, that was the extent of it. Or boys who liked to do cooking in the kitchen, and that was a little frowned upon. But there were some boys who did. It's very different now. Not everywhere, but it's a growing, changing world. And one of the things I find hope in is that we don't want to limit people by their gender. And when it comes to the qualities of mothering, you all have them. Whatever your gender identification is, you all have them. We all have those qualities. We all care. We all nurture. Not just our children, but, as part of the village, other children. We are part and parcel of a community and communities where we all have the capacity to love, care for, protect, nourish. I was driving along, as oft I do, listening to the radio, and I heard this beautiful, gentle, melodious male voice, somebody talking and talking intelligently and thoughtfully, and I said, who is this person? Who could this be? That voice, it's kind of familiar. But I couldn't place it for a little bit, and then I just kept going, listening, and it turned out to be David Brooks. How many of you know the name David Brooks? Okay, if you watch NPR, listen to the radio, I don't watch TV hardly at all, except reruns of NCIS and the West Wing. But other than that, I do listen to the radio from time to time, and I also listen on my computer. I check out TED Talks quite a lot, and I've recommended them to you before, and I recommend them again. There's such fascinating topics and speakers, and I've never found a dud in a lot of them. Well, he was talking on the radio, a speaker at the Commonwealth Club, and then it was just, I loved what he was saying, and I went home, and I happened to be, researching for this particular sermon, and looked on TED Talks, and there he was, giving a TED Talk, basically around the same subject matter, which gives me hope as well. He talked some first about politicians, how skillful socially they are, in his experience as a journalist in Washington, D.C. They tend to be physical a bit, shake hands with both hands, and maybe put arm around somebody's shoulder as they convince. And he observed Mitt Romney once, for example, in a meeting, I think it was in New Hampshire or something. He was meeting different people as he was a candidate. And he went through greeting people, shaking hands, talking, listening, talking, listening. It was all beautiful, he said. But he thought, well, that's pretty typical for a politician. And then Romney came to the front and was saying goodbye, and he could name everybody by first name. He could name everybody by first name who he had met. That is a social skill, he said. And then he said, while many politicians develop these skills socially, when it comes to policy, they start making decisions as if they were accountants. They fail to have trust in people. They fail to understand the social and psychological impacts of policies. In fact, they dehumanize people when it comes to policy making because, he said, by and large, at that level, they separate out reason and emotion, as if reason and emotions were completely separate. It's a shallow view of human nature, of human character. Because nowadays we don't have a system, a way of incorporating our emotions and reason. We don't seem to have a path to that. And he said, we need a deeper view of human nature. We need to operate from a deeper perspective of what human nature really is. We need to study consciousness. And a new humanism needs to emerge and is emerging little by little. And he cited a few insights from his work, a colleague, Antonio Damasio, who does research about consciousness. And he said a few things. He said, first, the unconscious mind does most of our work. Second, the unconscious mind is very smart. Our conscious mind can, in the course of a day, take in 100, 200 factoids shooting at us, but can only really process maybe a fraction of those things. But our unconscious mind does the work of integrating that input in different ways, and that is something that can help us and does help us to understand how our emotions are connected to reason and how that connection is paramount to developing wisdom. And we need wisdom. Is somebody else's mom calling? We need to develop greater wisdom, and we cannot do it as long as we see the world bifurcated. Men do this, women do that. Women are mothers, men are fathers. Emotions, women accept anger, men get to have anger. Women, not so much. Reason, of course, men, not women. And we see the world functioning or dysfunctioning with that bifurcated sense of how the world works. Conscious mind taking in data as if taking in data and analyzing it. You know, Mary, my Mary, has said to me from nearly the beginning of our relationship 17 years ago, yes, 17 years ago, 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4. 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4. And what she meant by that, at least what I have come to see that to mean, is yes, you know, it's not all about the logic. It's about integrating in the circumstances, the human effect of policy, the human effect of how we treat one another, the human effect of how women treat men, men treat women, how we treat one another. 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4. And so David Brooks talked about concepts of, well, 4 concepts in particular that I felt were interesting, although I have to say his language was a little, you know, it's like new words. So I had never heard, perhaps you have heard of the word equipoise. Anybody ever hear that word before? Well, there is such a word, and I did look it up to make sure there was such a word. But basically, you know, it's much more complex, but what he was taking from it is that we need to learn to live with uncertainty. That too often, especially in the male, reason first, logic first kind of way, we too often have overconfidence in logic, in reason, and sometimes in ourselves. Now, not everybody. There are a lot of people with low self-esteem. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands now. But that's not, his point was that very often in our world, especially men, are encouraged to be self-confident. Me, confident. And as things have evolved over the past 50, 60 years, maybe longer, little by little, women who are in the male sphere of industry and corporations and so on have come to value more and more of that. That's why I hate it when people say simply, we need more women in public office. Well, yeah, just to count the numbers, yeah. But what we need is more women and men who have an understanding of how reason and emotion are interconnected. How they are interconnected. So he talks about equipoise, he talks about metis, which is basically just being sensitive to the environment around you. You know, I'm not talking about the pollen count, although that's good too, but I'm talking about being sensitive to how what we're saying and what we're doing on a macro level and a micro level impacts the people and the community around us. When we make policy, we need to look beyond the dollar sign and what it gets you. We need to look, well, how will that implementation of that particular policy impact the people, the country, the communities? So that he calls metis. Obviously, sympathy is what it sounds like. To better understand how individuals exist, we have to be in conversation with people who are different from ourselves. We have to. And that, again, the tendency for politicians is not to do that. And the tendency to support change and to support action, not just in the political world, but that reason too often goes off on this, what really is a tangent away from the emotion, which need to be together. And then lastly, he talks about limerence. Limerence meaning in this instance, and it's much more complicated, I did look it up, but in this instance, your motivation, your drive. Unconscious mind, he says, longs for transcendence. So the unconscious mind is doing a lot of work, integrating what we cannot with our conscious minds. Our conscious minds are available to us except for when we sleep or if we're under anesthesia. But it is the bulk of the work that he's saying and has reinforcement from studies that others have done, that is something that we need to understand, that the unconscious mind is at work in that deep way when we're asleep, and that it helps us to integrate emotion and data points that we get. And that right now we function, by and large, in a rather shallow way in our world, which is supporting senses of isolation by individuals who do not get the benefit of an understanding of not just our interdependence. You know, we talk about the interdependent web of all existence. Well, that's true. That's one of our principles. But he's also talking about how each feeds and fuels the other, that we all do. So whether we're talking about mothering and fathering, again, without too much detail about what fathering is besides planting a seed, we need to have a better understanding and not just look at 2 + 2 as if it always equals 4. Now, I've talked to you about hope before. Hope is really an orientation of spirit, an orientation of the heart. It's something that is alive in us all the time. And then there's something which is aimed hope. In other words, focused on an outcome. If we don't also recognize how those are integrated, to connect back to that well of hope that is in each of us, then we're missing something really important to our understanding and existence in the world. So I don't want to say that we're not to recognize difference between people in terms of gender or gender identity or the continuum. I'm not saying that. There's some wonderful things about our differences, whether we're talking male, female, or within the continuum where we are placed in different places on that continuum. I'm not saying erase difference. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about that we have focused mostly on putting people into categories. Mothers, fathers, men, women, and how they should function. And what I found so hopeful in what David Brooks was saying is that there is a new humanism coming. And there are people who are doing scientific research and social research who are coming to these understandings that we are actually in trouble if we continue to look at the world as if it is in 2 camps, 2 places. We have to open our minds and our hearts. So So what? So what? It's Mother's Day. And I'm not suggesting you don't go and celebrate Mother's Day, moms. I invite all of us to consider how it is in our different ways we each mother, not just our children, but each other, in the sense of providing care and nurture, companionship, understanding, and how we can open our hearts and minds to different ways of thinking, different kinds of emotional responses. That's what I think David Brooks was speaking to, and he wasn't talking about Mother's Day, but that's what spoke to me about this business of mothers and mothering, and poor Anna Jarvis and poor Julia Ward Howe, who had a very different idea of necessity that fit in the times, you see. Necessity that fit in their times because women weren't heard. They were trying to get a little window open. But it's a different day. It's 2019 now. So let's all nurture all that we can imagine of the good of mothering and fathering, of parenting, of expressing our love for one another in different ways that are not gender-bound, that are not age-bound, that are not culture-bound, but that reflect our deepest yearning. That reflect our deepest yearning. Happy Mother's Day. And now, if you will, join in singing hymn 391 and sing it through twice.